The Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration and extermination camp was the largest of the sum of 2,000 Nazi concentration and labor camps, and the largest camp dedicated to the extermination of the Jewish people by means of gas. Over 1 million Jews were murdered at Auschwitz, as well as 70,000 Poles, 25,000 Roms, and some 15,000 Soviet prisoners of war. In the line with the convention in scholarship, I will refer to the camps simply as Auschwitz. The deportation of Jews from Hungary to Auschwitz began in May 1944. More than 400,000 Jews were murdered in the space of 56 days, following the rise of power of the Hungarian Eros Cross Party in October 1944. Thousands of Budapest Jews were murdered on the banks of the Danube, and tens of thousands were forced to join death marches toward the Australian border. In all, approximately more than 500,000 Hungarian Jews were murdered. The extermination camp Auschwitz, to which Hungarian Jews were deported, was located within the range of the Allies' bomber aircraft, especially the 15th US Air Force that was operated from Italy. This led to demand being made to bomb the site, which it anticipated when it became clear that other attempts to prevent the murder of Hungarian Jews had failed. Supporters of the idea believed that the bombing of the camp and the destruction of its facilities would at least bring about a temporary halt to the murder of or slow them. One cannot ignore the significance of a special and intensive effort on the part of the Allies to neutralize the machinery of extermination. The fact that the extermination camp was not eventually bombed, along with the powerful and dramatic impact of the murder of the Hungarian Jews during the final stage of World War II, have turned the episode of the failure to bomb Auschwitz into a symbol of the powerlessness of the free world and of the Jewish leadership to rescue the Jews of Europe. From the late 70s and following the publication of David Wyman's study, we can mention his well-known book, The Abandonment of the Jews, that published in 1984. We can see the cover here. The question of the failure to bomb the Auschwitz camp has been at the forefront of the public and academic debate of the Holocaust. This is a most complex and complicated area of study that covers various eras and numbers of disciplines, beginning with the question regarding the technical possibility of the bombing, through examination of the information that was available to the Allies and to the Jewish and Zionist organization with regard to Auschwitz, and up to the debate on the function and reaction of political and military department in the United States and Britain to the issue of the bombing during 1944. In this lecture, I wish to reveal some new information found in the personal archives of American Jewish activists who were involved in the question of the bombing of the camp, and in particular, the paper of Leon Kubowitzki, who headed the World Jewish Congress Rescue Department. While serving with the World Jewish Congress in New York, Kubowitzki played a leading role in the rescue effort directed by the United States Jewish Organization during World War II. Kubowitzki, later Kubobi in Israel, immigrated to Israel in 1948. He was the Israeli ambassador to Czechoslovakia and Argentina, and the second chairman of Yad Vashem. From his documents, we can understand that Kubowitzki was planning to write a book about his rescue activities and took all the relevant documents from the World Jewish Congress files. A few words about the World Jewish Congress. The founding convention of the World Jewish Congress, held in Geneva in August 1936, was attended by 280 delegates from 32 countries. While this was a new organization, its ideological roots were in a transformation undergone by the Jewish communities in the United States and Europe following the First World War and the Balfour Declaration. the World Jewish Congress was founded in order to carry on the tradition of the American Jewish Congress and of the Committee of Jewish Delegation by operating as a voluntary body that represented the Jewish communities and organizations worldwide vis-a-vis government and international institutions, while fostering the development of social and cultural life in those communities. The founder and the first president of the World Jewish Congress was the Reform Rabbi Stefan Wise. You can see his picture, one of the foremost Zionist leaders in the United States and an active supporter of President Roosevelt and the Democrat Party. Although it was deemed as an international body, the World Jewish Congress in fact operated as an American Jewish organization. Its headquarters were located in the United States. Its European and South American offices were founded by American sources and reported to the heads of the World Jewish Congress in the United States. This was the state of affairs even prior to the Second World War. The dramatic events in the life of the Jewish communities in the early 40s increased the importance of the American elements within the World Jewish Congress, which came to be seen as a predominantly American Jewish organization. Nevertheless, the fact that the organization had been founded in an international format, that many of the processes leading to its foundation had taken place in Europe, and that it was focused on assisting European Jewry, smoothed the way for European Jewish activists such as Kubowitzki, who had been involved in the organization's European activities, to become part of its apparatus soon after they reached the United States in the late 30s. The World Jewish Congress archive contained a wealth of fascinating information regarding the organization's work on behalf of European Jews during the Second World War. A telling indication of the organization's importance at the time is the fact that the first significant report on the final solution reached the United States in telegrams sent from the Congress Swiss office, which took a long and complicated route before landing on Rabbi Wise's desk in New York on August 2nd, 1942. This document, known as the Wigner telegram, you can see a picture of the original telegram. The original telegram located in the Central Jewish Archive in Cincinnati at the Hebrew Union College campus. This document is known as the Wigner telegram for its sender, Richard Wigner, the World Jewish Congress emissary to Switzerland. From the World Jewish Congress documents, we learned that leading figures in the Jewish and Zionist leadership requested the United States administration not to bomb Auschwitz and sought to examine other forms of military action that could be employed against the camp. As a result, they became involved in complex military issues that were completely strange and unfamiliar to them. Careful reading of the studies devoted to the issue of the bombing of Auschwitz shows that while a number of scholars took note of this request, they present it as a peripheral enterprise that does not amount to a significant strategic step on the part of the United States Jewish leadership. The documents that I present point to a different state of affairs. The course of action taken by the United States Jewish leaders was indeed a significant strategic political step designed to damage the capability of the extermination camp by means other than bombing it. In his letter to John Powell, the executive director of the World Refugee Board, on July 1st, 1944, Kubowitzki wrote, "The destruction of the death installation cannot be done by bombing from the air, and the first victim would be the Jews who are gathered in those camps. And such a bombing would be a pretext for the German to assert that the Jewish victims have been massacred not by their killers, but by the Allied bombing." And here is the original letters, and the emphasized, not the red one, but the one in the text is in the original letter. Kubowitzki reported on the energetic handover to promote action on the ground directed at the Auschwitz extermination installation to the Zionist leadership in Palestine. On October 16, 1944, he wrote to Yitzhak Greenbaum, chairman of the Rescue Committee of the Jewish Agency in Palestine, informing him of the effort made by him and by his colleagues to bring about such an action. He makes no mention of aerial bombing. Kubowitzki regards the difficulties of communication between him and Greenbaum and states that the present letter constitutes part of an ongoing dialogue between the two rescue activists regarding an attack on Auschwitz. In late October 1944, the United States General Counsel in Jerusalem conveyed to Goldman a message from the War Refugee Board in Washington. This document, prepared by Kubowitzki, tells of the political activity conducted in London to this end and of an approach regarding this matter to the Soviet Union's embassy in Washington. The document underscores that the War Department in Washington has fully informed General Wiesels, Allied commander in the Mediterranean, with regard to the Anglo-American action in the matter of the death camps. Military issue was central in the correspondence between Kubowitzki and Greenbaum. Kubowitzki informed Greenbaum of the full scope of the activity that he and his associates conducting in the United States and elsewhere toward promoting a ground operation against the camp, and mentioning the names of other American Jewish figures who were involved in this effort, such as Nahum Goldman. He writes as follows: I also discussed Minister Alexander Kalkstein, consular at the Soviet embassy, our suggestion concerning the use of Soviet paratroopers for the destruction of the death installation. Mr. Kalkstein informed me that the ambassador had already cabled to Moscow on this matter after a talk he had had with Dr. Goldman, and promised to convey to Moscow our recent information and our request. The effort to promote military operation by Soviet paratroopers are just a tip of the iceberg of a wide-scale activities to ensure a ground rather than aerial operation against the extermination facilities at Auschwitz. At the end of August 1944, Kubowitzki wrote to the Assistant Secretary of War, John McCloy. He expressed his appreciation of the United States administration commitment to assist the Jews of Europe, adding that he was aware of the serious obstacles that stood in the way of a military action against Auschwitz. In the following paragraph, Kubowitzki wrote that as a representative of the World Jewish Congress, he had not requested that the extermination section be bombed, but rather that it be put out of action by other means, and noted that following. You may notice that in this letter, July 1st letter to Pell, we did not ask for the destruction of the death installation by bombing from the air. We asked that the destruction be done either by Soviet paratroopers or by the Polish underground. More recently, we have suggested that the paratroopers should be members of the Allied forces who would volunteer for the task. Again, the original letter and the emphasis is in the original letter. It's not mine. In contrast to the positive assessment of the United States administration position on attacking the extermination camp with which Kubowitzki later began, its ending was rather more somber. Kubowitzki spelled out the historical significance of failing to against the Auschwitz extermination section and voiced criticism of the administration's failure to do so thus far. The remains of the Jewish population in Europe are being exterminated in the death camp at the rate of 12,000 a day in the camp of Auschwitz alone. So Kubowitzki knew everything. I'm afraid history will fail to understand that no way has been found to slow down the pace of annihilation by destruction of the instrument of murder, the gas chamber, the gas van, the bath, the crematory. McCloy responded immediately. His reply clearly demonstrated that United States officials in Washington and senior military commanders seriously considered the option of a ground operation against Auschwitz. McCloy wrote as follows: the use of operational troops, to which you refer in your letter, must be subject to the restriction of the theater commander. Such operation, as you suggested, could fall within jurisdiction of the Allied Mediterranean commander, and he has been fully informed of the situation obtaining the death camp areas. He must be the judge of the practicality of such operation and its likely result. I'm sure he would do anything he felt he could to check those deadly excesses of the Nazis. Perhaps an alteration in the tactical situation may make it possible for him to take some effective steps along the lines you propose. And the original letter. Kubowitzki floated the idea of deploying volunteers on another occasion as well. He wrote to McCloy about a report in the New York Times on the operation conducted by Australian troops to liberate French prisoners facing death at the hands of the Nazis. The Australian officer interviewed by the paper was quoted as saying that he and his men had been willing to risk their lives in order to liberate the prisoners. Kubowitzki expressed his confidence that a sufficient number of volunteers could be found who were willing to take action to liberate Jews. In his words, enough volunteers would be found to participate in such an adventure. The story about the Australian officer and Kubowitzki suggesting that the paratroopers should be a member of the Allied forces who would volunteer for the task and willing to risk their life indicate that he understood that a ground attack was a very dangerous mission, and most of the volunteers will be killed. On October 17, 1944, Kubowitzki reported to the Advisory Council on European Jewish Affairs and the European representative on the supreme effort to bring about an attack on the extermination apparatus at Auschwitz as follows. We have said to all whom it might concern, history will never understand that there have been death factories organized to kill human beings at a speedy pace, and that nothing was done to destroy those installations, so as to slow down at least the pace of the slaughter. We have asked the installation be attacked, enforced either by the Polish underground or by Soviet paratroopers, or if possible, by Allied paratroopers. Although the gazing at Auschwitz continue, especially of Jews from Theresienstadt, and by the end of October, more than 33,000 Jews had been murdered in 31 days, the option of aerial bombing was not mentioned at all at this meeting. Kubowitzki proceeded to elaborate on the effort to promote a ground attack on the extermination installation. He spoke of a contact with the Polish government in exile and reported that despite the positive response by its representative, no practical steps had been taken to disable the installation at Auschwitz. Owing to the weaknesses of the Polish underground after the failure of the uprising in Warsaw. During the meeting, Kubowitzki displayed understanding of the inactivity of the Polish underground with regard to Auschwitz and the rescue of Jews through Poland in general. On other occasions, thought he was presenting in his criticism of the Poles. In a letter to Schwarzbach, a member of both the World Jewish Congress and the Polish National Council in London, for example, Kubowitzki sought to use the letter's close ties to members of the Polish government in exile to convey to them that the Jewish public was extremely critical of the Polish underground failure to take action against the installation of extermination in Auschwitz. Kubowitzki emphasized that a strong criticism stemmed from the fact that this failure to act against Auschwitz came on top of other instances in which the Polish government in exile had refrained from coming to assistance of Jews on Polish soil. From the protocol, we also learn that the head of the World Jewish Congress had approached Jan Masaryk, the foreign minister of Czechoslovakia government in exile, to check whether Czechoslovakian underground could play a part in the operation directed at Auschwitz. After consulting the relevant officials and his colleagues in the government in exile, Masaryk reported that they had concluded that such an operation was not possible. The tenor of the discussion at this meeting reflected the overwhelming sense of powerlessness felt by the head of the World Jewish Congress. This is manifested in Kubowitzki's remarks toward the end of the meeting. And if there is some appropriate method we did not resort to, and you want to suggest to us, please do it. It is important to note that despite the failure to set in motion a plan for neutralize the Auschwitz extermination section through a ground operation, neither Kubowitzki nor anyone else in the meeting mentioned the option of bombing the camp, a course of action of which all participants were well aware, and sought only to find alternative ways for mounting a ground attack. Kubowitzki did not give up. At the same day of the meeting, Kubowitzki wrote a long letter to Dan Pempkins, the Czechoslovak ambassador in Washington. Kubowitzki laid out his views on the recent developments in Europe, which so he believed justified a further approach by the Czech government. He explained that the German weaknesses position in the European theater left opening for significant intervention on the part of the various underground forces and the Czech underground in particular, aimed at rescuing Jews. He believed that the success of the French resistance during the campaign to liberate France demonstrate the huge potential of an underground action. The French experience indicated that an operation conducted by the Czech underground could well do major damage to the German apparatus of extermination. He wrote inter alia as follows: the German war machine shows many signs of weaknesses, and energetic measures which would have been a failure 3 or 4 months ago may be successful today. The German may even be able to get rid of the liability of keeping Jews imprisoned through token resistance. Suggestion, therefore, we would be grateful to the Czechoslovakian government if it would give instruction to its underground forces fighting along the Hungarian border, and especially those fighting in the Subcarpathian Russia, to do the following. Later, Kubowitzki offers a detailed plan for that included sabotaging the various railroad lines leading to Poland. He wrote, if possible, attacking the trains themselves and freeing the Jews transported in them, attacking concentration camps and liberating the Jews held in them. The letter concluded with a detailed list of the main railroad lines running from Hungary to Poland, against which the Czech underground was asked to take action. Again, this is the letter, and here we can see at the end of the letter the list of the train lines. The letters, telegram, and protocol demonstrate that during 1944, the leadership of the World Jewish Congress focused its effort predominantly on bringing about a ground operation against the extermination apparatus in Poland and the rail lines leading to it. This assessment is reinforced upon examination the cases in which Kubowitzki and his associates did bring up the issue of an aerial bombing of the extermination facilities at Auschwitz with the United States administration. First, examination of the documents pertaining to the present study reveals that most of the approach made to the United States administration, to the Allies, to the government in exile, addresses a ground rather than an aerial operation. Moreover, we found that the requests to mount a ground operation are made by a third party and merely transmitted to the United States and British authorities by the World Jewish Congress. Thus, in his well-known letter in August 9, 1944, Kubowitzki transmits to Undersecretary of War McCloy a request submitted by Ernst Fischer, a member of the Czechoslovakian government in exile and the Czechoslovakian State Council. It was not Kubowitzki's isolated and personal course of action. It was a significant strategic decision that was accepted by the institution of the World Jewish Congress and served with the Zionist leadership in Palestine, and which constantly guided the World Jewish Congress dealing with the United States administration, the Allies, and the government in exile. Kubowitzki and his colleagues were well aware of the tremendous military effort of the Allies in Europe during the summer of 1944. But from their perspective, destroying the death facilities in Auschwitz and saving Jewish life should be part of the strategic goals of the Allies in 1944. Grant Wigner, that we mentioned earlier, expressed the view. It was always said, we have to win the war. We told the military leaders and the political leaders we shouldn't only aim to win the war, but we should also try to help those who were condemned to death. There were a kind of insensitivity that prevailed, and it was terribly difficult to accept. I pleaded many times with American and British authorities were accessible to me. We don't want to win the war only to find that all our people will be dead. However, later post-war references by leaders of the World Jewish Congress to the failure to bomb Auschwitz make no mention of the organization opposition to this step during 1944. The authors of the official history of the World Jewish Congress likewise choose to ignore the organization involvement in the affair of not bombing Auschwitz. Those involved in the failure to bomb Auschwitz preferred to erase from the memory, or at least to downplay, this element. One may suppose that in retrospect, the information that emerged about the Nazi extermination apparatus in general and the murder of Hungarian Jews in particular led to the conclusion that bombing Auschwitz from the air would indeed have been appropriate in 1944. A survey of the episode of not bombing Auschwitz indicate the importance of using archival materials outside the United States into the American Jewish historical discussion. American Jewish rescue activists in the 40s were active in the United States, but the nature of the work was universalistic. In addition, some of them immigrated to Palestine in the second half of the 40s. As a result, we cannot understand the events in the 40s without referring to relevant documents in Europe and Israel's archives. It is difficult to evaluate the extent to which the failure to bomb Auschwitz can be attributed to the opposition to such an attack voiced by the World Jewish Congress. One may suppose that in the light of the significant role played by the organization within the overall rescue effort conducted in the United States, its opposition to this course of action contributed to the crystallization of the opposition within the United States administration to bombing the camp. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. If you could now exit the PowerPoint.
Yes.
Okay, and now we get to see each other. Thank you so much. So we have several questions. I also have some of my own, but several people have asked about the role about Nahum Goldman, who, as the co-chair of World Jewish Congress, repeatedly lobbied American, British, and Soviet officials in favor of Auschwitz or railways leading to it. So isn't isn't what Goldman said to all these allies of Fisher more significant than what Kubowitzki, a lower level official, said in these documents that you have quoted?
First,
so if you could maybe elaborate.
Do you want to collect some question and then answer? Okay.
Yeah. So essentially about World Jewish Congress and Nahum Goldman and those in the World Jewish Congress who were in fact lobbying for the bombing.
Yeah. First, Kubowitzki actually is the head of the rescue committee of the World Jewish Congress. And again, Goldman in 1944 is not a co-chair. He is very important in the Congress. But the official representative of the World Jewish Congress concerning rescue activities it's Kubowitzki. It's Kubowitzki. And regarding Goldman especially, Goldman is a very complicated person. As I see Goldman in many episodes, in many very important historical episodes, Goldman said two things regarding the same issue. So as I present in my presentation, sometimes he were in favor of aerial bombing, and sometimes he was against it. So and it's happened a lot. It's happened a lot regarding Goldman.
And clearly, I mean, most people and some of the participants also, as we have always understood that the issue was not the attack on Auschwitz itself, but on the rail links. So can you explain or clarify how bombing train tracks versus the camp, aside from the on the ground activities, the sabotage activities that may have dealt with the train tracks, as your documents were showing, but weren't there considerations about bombing the train tracks as opposed to the camp itself?
I think, as I see it, the Allies did not have the technical ability to significantly damage the railway lines. And you could see it. It's reflected in the Normandy invasions. Significant damage to the railway line could only be carried out by the different undergrounds. And actually, you can see from the documents that Kubowitzki is aware of this fact. I think to bomb the railway line, it was something very important for allies, not just because of the Jews. You know, it's not what the Jews. It was soldiers, supplies, military supplies, and etc. and etc. So it was important for the allies, not just because of the Jews.
And I actually, you were sort of alluding to it, but one of the questions that I had was the political context of the Allies, right? That we have the U.S., we have obviously Britain, and we have the Soviet Union. By 1944, the Soviet forces are moving into the territory of Poland, where many of these camps exist. So I wonder whether you could elaborate a little bit about this, the political factors that may have played a role in the American decisions, and whether there was any discussion and the sources that you have on the questions between the West versus the Soviet power.
Yes. You know, the logical things to do is that the Red Army would bomb Auschwitz, and but unfortunately it haven't been done, and I don't think that anyone have any relevant documents, no relevant documents regarding the Soviet Union and the Red Army and the whole issue of bombing Auschwitz have ever been found. So actually we don't have the information, except for what I present in my presentation, that Kubowitzki and other figures in the World Jewish Congress approached the Soviet embassy in Washington and asked the Soviet to do, but actually nothing happened. The issue of the British activity in context of saving Jews in general and regarding Auschwitz in particular is complicated. And the first debate in the study regarding especially Churchill's role in this regard, his critics say he ignored and the more positive perspective claim he simply didn't succeed. But anyway, the documents that I presented concern the United States, which is why I focused on the American arena in my presentation. Mm-hmm. And of course, the whole issue of Churchill and British in the Holocaust deserved a special presentation and a special talk.
And are any of the Soviet documents and Soviet archives even open? Presumably they were.
No, not something that I know about. No.
Another question is, can you say something about how the issue of bombing Auschwitz relates or does not relate to the issue of public protest versus private lobbying?
Yes. Oh, it's a wonderful question. It's wonderful and important question. And in a way, let's put it this way. The thing that, from my perspective, the thing that the Jewish and Zionist leadership in the United States was most afraid of was that the involvement of United States in the Second World War could be looked as something that the United States is doing to save Jews. That it could be some kind of the interest of the Jews to put United States inside the war, and because of this reason, most of the activity of the Zionist leadership in the United States and the Jewish community leadership in the United States were behind the scenes, not something that they want uh, um, uh, to put in to put in the first pages of the newspaper. The American Jewish leadership during the Holocaust choose not to conduct public activity for rescue because they fear that it would contribute to those who claimed that the war was a Jewish war. That is, the Jews drags the United States into the war because of their goal. And of course, the potential harm to President Roosevelt is obvious because if something like this could be developed in the United States.
So there are more questions specifically about the bombing and all this. So
I will try to answer.
yeah. We probably will not be able to get to many of them, and I will forward all of them to Zohar. So one of the attendees asks, but the Allies bombed railways constantly throughout 1944 and bridges too. What about George McGovern's statements about the damage that would have done? McGovern was one of the pilots who bombed the oil factories in Auschwitz.
So, again, it's important. It's important and answer a question, and of course, I appreciate what George McGovern said, but if we are thinking about again, let's take the invention to Normandy as something that can we learn from. You know, tons of bombs have been fall on Normandy to destroy the trail lines, but just the French underground, the Central Resistance, could do real damage to the train lines. And I think, and you can see it from Kubowitzki's perspective, actually understand it. The only way to stop the trains was if the Polish underground, the Czech underground, or paratroopers or partisan would damage the train. And I'm not a military historian. It's not my field. But as I understand, most of the military historian agree with this perspective.
One of the attendees is referring the Elie Wiesels' book Night, in which he described how he was a slave laborer in those oil factories when the Americans bombed them, and how they wished that they would bomb the gas chambers even though they knew they might be killed, because they were all doomed to be killed anyway. So what do you make of Elie Wiesels' view in light of the documents in your study?
Again, I'm not a defense lawyer of Kubowitzki or the American Jewish leadership in the 40s, but I think that we have to understand their point of view in the reality of the 40s, and not in the reality of today. It's very easy to sit on our comfortable chairs today, 77 years after, and say this should be done and this shouldn't be done. But I think that we must understand what happened actually in 1944. And for example, let's take Professor Yudabaru. one of the most important Holocaust researchers and Holocaust survivors. And actually, Bauer actually agree with the view that Kubowitzki represented. In Bauer's opinion, the bombing would have killed many Jews. Some of them were eventually saved, and its contribution to reducing the scope of murder could be very small. Yeah, he claimed that the German had demonstrated that the ability to murder Jews in many ways, even if they have not succeeded, and if they have not succeeded in rehabilitation the gas, they continue the gas chamber, they continue to kill Jews in other ways. So, of course, in perspective, I agree. As an historian, as a human being, I think I can understand that maybe it was the right thing to bomb Auschwitz in the air in 1944, but I think we have to look at this issue in the reality of 1944 and not of today.
So I think we'll close it with the question. So several people have also reminded us that that Zionists have called for bombing, and Golda Meir and others. But even if we take into consideration the debates even within the Jewish leadership, whether the World Jewish Congress, as your documents are showing, one question that could be asked is about the role of anti-Jewish atmosphere that existed at the time in both the U.S. Society and the U.S. State Department. Did any of that play a role in simply not making such military decisions based on the argument of saving Jewish lives?
You know, it's a tough question. Of course, I think in a way that in the State Department, that the anti-Jewish, and I can say anti-Semitism in the State Department, it's something unique in the general American I'm not talking in the public, but in the administration. Look what happened around Roosevelt. So many Jews, so many important Jews are part of the closed circles of closed circles of Roosevelt. But I agree that that Jewish leadership was afraid in 1944, during the Holocaust time, was afraid from the anti-Semitism in the American Jewish society, and this why they didn't put the whole issue of rescue Jews in the forefront of the public debate. I completely agree. But actually, what can actually have been done that didn't what else could be done to save Jews after the Nazi came to power and after the beginning of the final solution? It's complicated. It's a complicated question. And you know what Wigner wrote, as I present in the last stage of my presentation. It's important to win the war, but it's important to win the war and not but the Jews are killing during this process, and it's very hard for us, maybe especially today, and especially as Israeli, maybe it's very hard for us to accept that maybe not a lot could be done to save Jews after the beginning of the final solution.
And the last questions I will ask again. Our attendees are pointing out to protests, to other Jewish groups calling for all measures to be taken to destroy the camps and so on and so forth. Were there any other voices, any other officials who were arguing that the bombing should not happen, whether for those humanitarian reasons or other strategic reasons?
Not except from the World Jewish Congress document that I presented you, I'm not aware of.
Kubowitzki was the only one who was.
It's not, again, it's not just Kubowitzki. It's Kubowitzki is a representative of the. Kubowitzki is not a private person. He is a representative of the World Jewish Congress, and as I presented the protocol of one of the protocols of the meetings of the World Jewish Congress Advisory Committee, and no one said anything against Kubowitzki attitude to against bombing from the air. I couldn't find anything in Stefan Weiss' papers against Kubowitzki. In other important figures in the World Jewish Congress against bombing, no one came against Kubowitzki regarding this issue. So it's not Kubowitzki as a private person. It's Kubowitzki as a representative of the World Jewish Congress.
Okay, thank you so much for your presentation. And I just want to also invite all of you to join us next week for our next event. And we have a number of others coming up through the early May, and one actually related also to the Holocaust. And on May 5th, we will host a panel discussion on the